know that there are people who willingly push themselves into poverty and misery and don't even know it? Who knew that poverty and misery could be so achievable in the exact same way as wealth and success? The right set of behaviors and personal choices will move you towards a life of poverty and misery to be enjoyed by you and your family for generations to come. Listen, you don't have to be pushed into wealth and fulfillment. You can simply leverage your background, education, and financial acumen to become poor in record breaking time. Today, I will be sitting down with author Celeste Duffie, who has penned what I believe to be one of the most impactful books that can change your life. Not including the Bible, of course. You know what I mean. But Celeste's tongue in cheek writing style, coupled with her hilarious and provocative way of expressing her ideas, will keep you on the edge of your seat, wondering, what is she going to say next? And then in the next breath, have you sitting on the edge of your bed wondering what the heck have you been doing with your life this entire time? Yes, this book will make you question your reality and force you to do one of two things. Either you're going to self-examine and make some radical changes so that you don't end up on the fast track downward toward poverty and misery, or you will throw this book across the room, mad at Celeste because she had the nerve to try to help you, but you'd rather continue being poor, broke, busted, and disgusted. So come on in the room because we're going to talk about it. All of this and more on the Standard of Truth podcast. Grace and peace, everybody. It's your host, April Chapman, here with the Standard of Truth podcast. Happy Friday, you guys. Okay, I have been so excited about tonight's show because have you ever, read a book and you're like, okay, this book is good, but it's something a little different about this book. It wasn't that you read it and you're like, oh, I enjoyed that. That's nice. And then it's like out of sight, out of mind. Nope. Not this book. Tonight, I have author Celeste Duffie that will be joining me, and she wrote this amazing book. Y'all, I know that the title did it for me too, but we're adults. We're adults. It is not being used in a profane way. It is actually to prove a point. But the book is titled The Assbackwards Way to Move Forward. When Celeste sent me this book, I was like, okay, I'll read it. No big deal. And from the introduction on forward, I was immediately captivated. I was captivated in a couple of ways. So I was like, okay, wait a minute. This book is funny. Funny, but not funny in the sense that Celeste has this really tongue-in-cheek, provocative, but kind of like on a slick sly. It's just a nice hybrid of you done messed up now, Leroy, coupled with your mama told you there's going to be days like this. And if you don't listen, this is going to happen to you. So I am so excited. I want to thank everybody for joining us in the live stream, but I don't want to belabor the point. I want to bring my guests in so we can talk about this book because this book has truly changed my life. Changed my life so much so that it is now required reading in the Chapman Christian Academy homeschool. Yes, my 13-year-old is halfway through it. And when he's done, he's passing it to the 15-year-old because there are so many principles in this book that while me and my husband are teaching it to them, getting it from a different voice in this perspective and in this humorous yet not so funny kind of way, there's no way you can read this book and it not change your life. So join me in welcoming to the show, Miss Celeste Duffie. Hey, sis.
Hello, April. How are you? I'm so excited to be here.
You listen, I've been excited all week because when we talked on the phone and I was like, girl, what made you come up with a title like this? I need you briefly. I want you to introduce yourself first and then you need to tell me what made you title the book The Assbackwards Way to Move Forward.
Okay, so my name is Celeste Duffie. I live in Washington, D.C. I am, as you said, the author of The Assbackwards Way to Move Forward. And to try and explain how I came up with the book is I'll have to tell you about an experience I had because I didn't really understand how I came up with the book until I had this experience. So it was a regular Saturday. I'm in my house. I'm doing my chores. I'm just going on about my business. And I have the television on, and there's an interview with J.K. Rowling. She's the author of the Harry Potter books. Now, she's someone who's notorious for not doing interviews. So I immediately was like, oh, wow, and at this time, I was probably about halfway or a little more than halfway finished with the book. So I was deep into the writing process at this time. And so I said, well, let me put things aside because I want to see this interview. Because at that time, I was really starting to pay attention to writers, how they wrote, did they keep a schedule? And I can start now by saying no one should write a book the way I did. I did not write it in any way that is advisable. No one has ever advised my process, which is a non process. But I said, well, let me listen to what JK is talking about. And she tells the story about how she was at that time. She was a single mother. She didn't have any money. The rent was going to come due,
Mm.
and she couldn't afford to live in London. So she lived in what we would call in America an exurb of London. And she was going into London for a job interview. So she's on the train, and when she's done with the interview, and I want to say it was in maid service or in hospitality, she comes back. She doesn't get the job. She's back on the train. She's riding back to the little town where she's from. She says she's looking out of the window at the rolling hills and she's completely dejected. And she says, as she's sitting there and she's feeling very sad for herself, she's like, I don't know how I'm going to feed my child. I don't know what I'm going to do. She says, this thought pops down into the center of her head. And the thought is, he is a boy, he is a wizard, and he doesn't know it. She said the thought struck her because it was whole and it was complete.
Mhm.
And that from that moment forward, she could see the book and the subsequent books from the very beginning all the way to the end. She saw the whole thing. And I thought, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me. So in my case, I was at work one day, minding my business. Now, a little backstory at that time, I was co hosting a radio show. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But I was co hosting a radio show and I was working on the show because, was doing content for the show at that time. It was a show that was sort of looking at cultural ideas and things that were happening in the culture and in pop, culture and in media through an economic lens.
Mm.
So I was on the show and I was preparing for the show, and I get this thought that pops right down into the center of my head. And the pop, and it said, the book is called The Ass Backwards Way to Move Forward. Instead of showing people how to find wealth and fulfillment, you show people how to find poverty and misery. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
that's a good idea. So I jumped on my laptop, I sent myself an email, and I outlined the whole book right there. And I was able to do it literally in like 5 minutes. It was whole, it was complete. I knew the title, I knew all of the pillars, I knew exactly, how I would structure it. So I had all of that information. I emailed it to myself, and then I did absolutely nothing, did not write one word for 8 months.
Oh no. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So
But
wait, were
when
you just having like writer's block, or you just like, okay, well, I'm.
No, it was just at the time I was toying with the idea of a blog. The blog sort of never got off the ground. I was really not sure how to do a blog. And I remembered I had this book. And the reason I remembered I had this book is because on the radio show there was a guy there who called himself a seer. He could sort of read people's intentions and all of this type of stuff. And I was very skeptical of it. I was like, yeah, no, I'm not. I'm not really with all that. But you're on the show, and I was courteous and nice, and participated as I did all the time. But I was just like, this really isn't for me. But before he left, he said to me, because he asked everyone, well, do you want me to read you? Do you want me to, look into your future? And I was like, no, I'm all set. You don't need to. And he said, I just want to tell you something. You've been given a gift that you're doing nothing with. And until you do something with it, you're not going to be blessed. And I was like, okay. I said, well, I really haven't been given any gifts. I'm sort of not really sure what you're talking about. He said, oh, yes, yes, you are. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And I was like, well, and I'm thinking, I'm racking my brain. And then I say to him, I said, well, I did a few months back have an idea of a book. And interestingly enough, he said to me, he said, it's not one book, it's four. And I said, well, you know what? Let me just do this. Just, on the off chance. Let me pull that outline out and see if I can do something with it. And so the rest is behind me. It is what I did. And it took me some time to write the book because again, my writing process was terrible. I would stop and start and stop and start. And part of that was because I didn't write until I had something to say.
Well,
So I
you got a
wasn't
lot to say in this one.
I wasn't on a timeline. I didn't owe the book to anyone in so many months. I didn't have any of those type of pressures. And I just was sort of like, I don't, I'm not doing this to be doing it.
Mhm.
There's a reason for this. This book was given to me, and I did understand that. This book is not mine. This book belongs to God. It came through me, but it is not mine. I don't take credit for it in that way. Certainly, I had some labor, but the direction of the book was not mine. And I was sort of like, there is some element of needing to honor the source. So I'm not just going to put words on a page.
Okay.
Words have to say something, they have to mean something, and they have to give the reader a reason to go from one page to the next. And that's what I tried to do. I tried to make sure that when you finished a page, you would not put that book down.
You achieved that, because I didn't really sleep for, like, a couple of nights until until so I'm just gonna tell the audience, okay, you guys, so what is so unique about this book? You're like, "Darn, April, like, why are you fangirling over a book so bad?" It's not that. I've read plenty of books before. The outline and cadence of this book is unlike anything I've ever read before. Meaning, like Celeste said, instead of her saying, here's your roadmap, your path to, prosperity and wealth, she does it in the inverse. But I didn't know that when I first picked it up. So I'm reading the first couple of pages. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, no, I don't wanna be poor and miserable, but she's literally giving you a step-by-step guide on this is how poor poverty mindset and that leads to misery. She, like, literally takes you down that path. And first, after you read a couple paragraphs, you're like, "Oh, I get it." And that's why you can't put it down because it constantly makes you want to turn the page to see, all right, well, what else have I done? Because I ain't gonna lie, there was a couple of chapters I was like, "Ooh, I might still have a little bit of a poverty mindset." I was like, "Well, I got to fix this." Like it really made me want to be like, "Ooh, I need to fix this." So the book has a particular cadence and it does keep you engaged. You really don't get bored. One, because it's so funny. And when you're reading it, you're like, I know somebody just like that. And now I see why they are like the way they are and why they seem stuck and can't move forward in life. So I'm always intrigued by books that make you self-examine and make you reflect, and this book really did keep me up at night. So the first thing I want us to do, I want you to define for the audience when you say poverty, because what I don't want people to walk away is like, "Oh my gosh, they just dogging out poor people." No, no, no. We're not, it's not a monetary thing. I need you, Celeste, to define poverty in the context of how you use it in this book, and that'll give us the proper springboard to kind of move forward.
Okay, yes. So poverty in the book, and you're right. We have a natural tendency, based on the time that we live in and the inclination that we have, to always associate the idea of poverty with money. I actually think that poverty is something much deeper, that poverty is, in fact, a spiritual lack or deficit. That spiritual lack and deficit leads and inspires people to make bad choices and have poor behavior. And it's the bad choices and the poor behavior that erodes wealth. It is not having money or not having money. So there are many people who have large bank accounts and they have a lot of money, but they're poor.
Mm.
Um, John Morant, but we can keep going. But there are people who no matter how much money you give them, and you can look at, and I mean it's easy to think of athletes and entertainers, singers, actresses, those type people, because they're on the screen and we see them and we sort of have some access to them. But if you watch their behavior, they're often in situations where they're paying lawyers, paying this one, paying to try and manage and mitigate the consequences of their bad behavior. So, poverty in my book is not a financial distinction. It's a behavioral distinction. And more importantly than just your behavior, it is your behavior is the evidence that
Mm.
you have a spiritual lack. I know that you are spiritually lacking when you make bad choices and and you have bad behavior. That is our evidence. So if people are walking around, or if you're someone who's walking around and in the public and even in private amongst your family and friends, you are not someone that can be counted on to make good choices and who can behave well. We can all know without a doubt, we don't have, there's no mystery. We don't have to wonder. You have a spiritual lack. That is the root, that is the source of that behavior.
Right. So I like how basically poverty, you say it's a mindset coupled with a collection of habits and choices that yield a certain result. And what you do in the book, once you define poverty and you kind of lay out that foundation, like from the onset, I was like, okay, I get it. I understand what she's saying now. We all have a point of reference in our mind of, yep, I know people with money. And it's like, it's this mindset. I did I did not realize that I was exposed, to a poverty mindset per se until I read the book. Like, I could see situations in my life from either the past or even maybe some habits in the present that I was like, "Ooh, no. I have to change that." So, let's segue into misery, because you talk about in the book that poverty leads to misery. How do you define that?
Okay, so poverty is the outward manifestation of your spiritual deprivation and lack. Misery is the internal condition. So,
Mm,
misery is a hedge against prosperity. And when I say that, what I mean is misery is the emotional system that uh, is used by bad choices and poor behavior, organizes those emotions that come from and that inspire bad choices and poor behavior to create a system. So people who are poor are people who consistently make bad choices and have poor behavior. These are not one-offs. Every human being has made a bad choice. Every human being has looked at a situation or a time in their life when they've thought to themselves, I really wish I could have done that differently. We all want a do-over. Everybody said in hindsight it's 2020. So
right.
that's a normal way to live, to make a mistake, to step back, correct, reflect, to do those things. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about someone who is reliably making bad choices and reliably behaving poor. They've created a system internally. It is an emotional system that organizes those behaviors such that they're never in position to do the right thing. It sustains poverty. It's a system that sustains poverty, which is why I say misery is a hedge against prosperity.
I like that. Like I said, when I was reading this book, sometimes you read a book and you're projecting and you're like, "Yep, I know such and such," and you have a person in mind. This book did that, but then I was just like, "Oh, That's me. I was like, yeah, okay. She barking up my tree now. I was like, okay, I see you, sis. I wasn't mad though. I wholly leaned into it. My husband was like, yo, what is up with this book? I was like, babe, you have to read it. He was like, clearly, because you ain't been asleep in like 2 nights. He's like, I need you to go to bed. So the way you divide the book, the way the Celeste divides this book into pillars, basically like these principles, like if you follow these principles, these 9 principles, you will sure enough be on your road. She has this term that she refers in the book. It's onward and downward. She ends every chapter like that. And every time I saw those 2 words, I was just like, yep, we at the bottom now. And this book it crosses socioeconomic lines as well as ethnic lines. No, regardless of what ethnicity you are, someone who is on a fast track trajectory toward poverty and misery. One thing in particular you mentioned in the book, you talk a lot about liberal elites. Like, I don't think there is a chapter or a pillar in the book where you don't mention them. Talk to us about these liberal elites. Like, who are they? And how do we identify them? What are some marks or characteristics of these liberal elites? Because that is a major component in the book. Before we can even get into some of the pillars that I'm going to talk about, you guys, that you like, if you do these things, you will definitely be on the road to poverty and misery. Before we do that, I have to define this subset of the culture that Celeste talks about a lot, because it's almost like that's the antecedent of everything. They've got their hands and their claws in it. Talk to us about these liberal elites. Who are they? What is that?
So the liberal elite is kind of a little bit of a high level concept. So if I could back up just a little bit in
Okay.
terms of the structure, since you mentioned the onward and downward. So how we defined poverty and misery, and sort of the way the book is organized is I have 9 pillars. What you would think of in a say traditional conventional book would be chapters.
Right.
So I have 9 pillars. Each of the pillars would be a chapter, and each of those chapters describes a particular behavior. And those behaviors are things that you must do to become poor. There is nothing in my book that is about wealth and fulfillment. I am not trying to show people how to be wealthy. I'm not trying to show people how to be fulfilled and have flourishing lives. I am showing people how to get to the bottom. So we, at the end of every chapter, where you think to yourself, this cannot get worse, I promise you it can.
Did
That's
y'all
why
hold
we.
on? Did y'all catch that? Literally, she's not lying. This whole book is like an instruction manual on how to get to the bottom fast. And that's what makes the book so scary, because you're like, oh my goodness, I'm doing this. And I can see the implications of, if I do this, yep, this is where it's gonna. I've never read a book that does it like that. So I'll let you continue, but she's right. It literally
Yes.
does that.
So yeah, I did that. I thought of myself, sort of when it was done and looking back on it, I was like, I'm the Jay-Z of poverty. This is the blueprint. This is the absolute blueprint. So I wrote it that way, onward and downward, and I sort of borrowed from Dante's Inferno. So in Dante's Inferno, he has his traveler who is escorted through, I believe it's 7 rings, until the traveler finally descends into the last ring, which is hell. So I wrote the book to go absolutely in a descending fashion. In fact, even in the book, the way it's numbered, we don't start at pillar 1. You start at pillar 9 and you descend in down into pillar 1. So onward and downward, when you get to 1, then we are at the bottom. And like I said, each time through each pillar, you should be thinking, well, this cannot, that was bad enough. There's no way it could get worse. But if I've done my job, it does. It gets worse. And in terms of the liberal elite, so I'm not going to tell you where that falls in terms of the pillars, but the liberal elite is a fictitious group. They're partly a fictitious group because I've never known or am aware of no one who self-identifies as a member of the liberal elite. So I
Mm,
couldn't actually call a person's name and say that, so and so over here, or this podcast, or that TV channel, or
right.
there is no one that's walking around going, I'm a member of the liberal elite. Come join us. We meet on Tuesdays. However, what I did find in a lot of the research that I've done for the book, and the when I'm articulating and describing, which I hope to explore very deeply, and that's part of the reason I use humor, is because humor allows you to really look very deeply inside a subject so that what seems complicated can be very simple. And so I approach the book with the idea of X equals, that no matter how big the equation is, at the end of each onward and downward, you would simply have an X equals. And it could be that simple. It's a binary choice. It could be that simple. So that was sort of the structure of the book. However, the liberal elite, this fictitious group of people that hates free market capitalism and is dedicated to the destruction of family,
Mm,
the liberal elite sort of are a macro archetype of people, so that some of the choices that we're making, that I articulate in the 9 pillars, those choices did not come to you accidentally.
mm,
Those are choices that were put on a menu, and that menu is served to you. Now, it is your choice whether or not to eat, and it's your choice whether or not you're going to bear the consequences of what it is you eat. But you don't necessarily create those choices,
right.
particularly in modern America. These are menu items that are popularized and glamorized, and there's a significant pathway and a trajectory so that you would pick these choices. And in my book, I hold the liberal elite responsible for creating the environment and the conditions in which bad choices are accessible and glamorized and
Mm,
incentivized to make. So everybody who's doing something isn't just doing it because on their own they came up with it. And I came to this when I was on the radio show, because it was a weekly show. It was usually 3 men and me, doing the show in the studio, and sometimes a guest. And what was I found fascinating is that most of the people, the guest and the other people on the show, the other host on the show, almost always had exactly the same opinion. They
mm,
may have expressed it a little differently based on their personality, but the ideas that they were expressing were all the same. In my opinion, what made the show interesting is I was sort of always the contrary. I was the contrarian of the group. My idea was always the one that was different from the group. But it started making me have a thought. And the thought I had was, are your thoughts your own? How
mm,
do you know you own your actual thoughts? A
right.
lot of people, all of us, believe a lot of things. But the question is, what you believe, is it because you believe it? Or are you incentivized to believe that? Is that a menu item that's been served to you?
Right. I'm glad that you said that because on my show I talk a lot about, like the aristocracy. Like I use that term. And they're kind of like always trying to sell you on your own impression and try to push this narrative on you. And I kind of liken that is maybe we can term the liberal elite in the same way. They have this narrative that they push. And like you said, there's like this menu of ideas that you believe, but you didn't come up with these ideas on your own. They were served to you like this smorgasbord. And for most people, they pick every single little thing off the menu, they take it in, and then they wonder why they're not getting the outcomes that they want. And that they're constantly, it's like no matter how hard they work, they're still on this downward spiral toward poverty and misery. So thank you for defining this archetype of the liberal elite. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to get into discussing the pillars of the book. And you start at the top with pillar 9 and you work your way down, which made sense to me. And the first pillar, you start at the top, is with attitude. And as soon as I read that section and you start talking about this pillar, I start imagining in my head, I'm like, I know exactly where she's going with this. So one of the things you discuss is people who are sold wholeheartedly on this poverty and misery mindset is that they have poor impulse control. So you have many poor people have the advantage of being parented by emotionally immature adults or young people. Now, the way she writes as if it's a good thing, y'all. So when I read this, I'm like, no, that's bad. That's horrible. The whole book is like that. So you're sitting there with your face all screwed up because you're like, no, that's not good. And so that's what makes the book so interesting. But talk to us about impulse control. And if you could, give us some examples of this in the culture so that we can know what to avoid.
So, yes, I did write the book with people in mind, including myself. I did not exempt myself from the book. So, this is not a big me and little you
Right.
type scenario, because we all can fall short. And the best thing to do is be honest about that. But a lot of the book, I can say I had many muses. And I had many muses. I use an example in the book of poor impulse control, which I believe is extremely important. And to be poor and eventually become miserable, I believe that you have to learn poor impulse control early. You
Mm,
must teach that to your children. And you will know you're successful with that if your children are poorly behaved in school or in any organized setting. You are succeeding at having teaching poor impulse control. But the example that I use in the book is in the grocery store, because this is something I think has happened to everyone. You're in
right.
line, you're in the grocery store, the line is long, people don't want to wait, but unfortunately you have to wait, and the person who's in front of you is just fidgeting, and they can't get themselves settled, they can't stand still, they start to sigh, then they start talking loud, and eventually their conversation, which is not really with the person they're with, is meant to be overheard by some personnel in the store. They might even try and turn to you and bring you into it. But they're visibly uncomfortable. The idea of waiting, of
Mhm.
simply having to stand and wait their turn, is really, really difficult for them. And that is someone who has very little impulse control. And they'll start saying they need to get somebody to open up a line. There are 25 people in this line, and why don't all these people walking around this store doing nothing? Can't
Can't nobody open up another lane?
Exactly. Those are people with poor impulse. Now, everyone else is in line. Everyone else is suffering the same fate. Somehow, everyone else has learned to stand and wait their turn. These people cannot do that. They cannot just suffer.
Mm,
They have no long suffering, which we understand biblically as patience.
right.
They have no ability to suffer. And people don't understand, and I'm not talking about abuse and pain and that sort of thing, but suffering, being tested, is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a very good thing. It builds character and it builds strength. We know that you can't have a diamond unless you have time and you have pressure. Anything that is that comes to fruition that is the result of no time and no pressure does not shine.
You ain't lying. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that so guys, like I said, out the gate, like the book kind of like just punches you in the chest because I am a notoriously impatient. I'm just impatient. Sometimes I just be like, can we hurry up? Like, how long are we gonna do this? Like, are you ready? Like, what's taking so long? Like, I'm just quick. I'm like, let's go, let's get it. And when you have children and they're learning and you just like, okay, I taught it to you like twice already. You don't get like you're forced to learn patience. And that's one of the fruit of the spirit. And so through this process of sanctification, and y'all, I am a work in progress. I am learning day by day that I'm like, oh no, if this is one of the pillars of attitude that is reflective of a person with a poverty mindset, I don't want to be that. Not just because I don't want to be associated with that, but I'm like, I should be more Christ-like. So I need to be a little bit more patient and long-suffering with people. And I do agree with you. I don't believe Christians in America have learned the art of suffering well, because in America, like being comfortable and not in situations that are inconvenient is supposed to be the norm. And when things are not well and things are uncomfortable, we don't like that. Like half of us, if we ever had to live in, these countries where the persecuted church is, we just would not make it because we're just like, well, what do you mean? The church pew doesn't have cushions? You want us to sit on the floor or no cushions? Like we just don't. We just not. We're not built for that. So I I got the memo. It was duly noted. And ever since I read that part of the pillar, I was like, I am working on that. And I checked it off. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, and there's some other attitudes as well.
Right. Well, I
Quick,
have it pessimistic outlook, taking everything personal makes you the center of life's activities. Talk to us about that.
yeah, I say in the book that poor people have an over exaggerated sense of self.
Mm,
And you must have an over exaggerated sense of self because you have to believe that everything is going on has to do with you. There can be no other reason anything's happening except you. You are at the center of all of life's activities. And since most things are not always going to be in your favor and going your way and exalting you, most of those people are pessimistic and unhappy and unpleasant all of the time because as the center of life's attention, it's just not always working out for them.
right.
So that's an excellent way to stop building misery in your life.
Right. You also have here, I thought this part was funny. You have find diversity. You say poor people believe that there are many ways to accomplish your goal. And at first I was like, girl, what you talking about? But then I read some more and I got it. But can you explain what you meant by that? Because at first I was like, what do you mean? You were talking about finding diversity. Matter of fact, where is it? You say after we talk about no, um, you was like that poor people deeply believe in adverse diversity and that there are all these different ways to achieve a goal. But then you contrast that with, if there are 10 people who are trying to get into prison or 10 people trying to get into Princeton, like there's a set way to do each of those, right? Talk to us talk to us about that one.
Yeah, so I say that poor people deeply believe in the diversity of process. They
Hmm.
believe that there's a variety of ways to achieve a particular goal. I say there isn't, that success as well as failure is very narrow. The process for achieving success is narrow, and the process for achieving failure is narrow. And I use the example of if you find 10 people who have the desire to achieve going to prison, and you have 10 people who have the desire to achieve going to Princeton. Most of the 10, the majority of the 10 in either place will have followed the same process. So let's, look at it very quickly. But if you wanted to go to prison, you are probably someone who did not do well in school as an early age. You definitely have low impulse control. You have started behaving in rebellious behavior and even in petty criminal activity in your late teens, and you graduate into more rebellious and harder crimes early on. That's the pathway. There are very few people in prison that you will find. I'm not saying, there's always an aberration.
Right.
It can always be a one off. But in general, the majority of people you're going to find have exactly the same process. And I use the same situation if you want to be a stem cell researcher. Same process. You did very well, or Princeton. You did very well in school. As you were an early reader. You did very well in school in elementary. You probably graduated in the top 10% of your class, and you probably enjoy a hobby that takes a lot of practice to master it.
Right. So, okay, so this next one, this is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. And the reason why I say that is because first I'll tell the personality or the characteristic that she talks about is the difference between help and support. And the reason why I say it's one of my biggest pet peeves because as an entrepreneur, I love being able to inspire people. And, if they see your efforts, it inspires them to be like, you know what, I can do that too. But what I'm noticing that what a lot of people like if you've mapped out a path for them to achieve something, and the difference between a person that wants help versus support, like I don't help people. I support them and to get them to a desired end. But talk to us in your book how you define the difference between help and support, because I felt that deep when you talked about that. Um, you have that person that they admire you for what they're doing, and like, you know what, you inspire me, and I feel like I could do that too. And then instead of you supporting them, you find I'll let you define it, but they literally want you to do it for them. They don't want support. They want what you define as help. So talk to us about help versus support.
So yeah, that's actually a very big idea, and it's actually a pitfall for lots of people. I think people actually think they're asking for support. When you don't give them help, what they'll say is, you don't support me.
Support me.
No, that's not true. So people are very confused about what help is and what support is, and I try to sort of demystify that and break that down, very simply so everyone could understand that. So support is, well, let me start with help. And I use the example of this. Let's say, you become unemployed, something, your money gets strange, your change is strange, and bills are coming up, and you're having some financial problems.
Right.
So you have a car note, and for whatever reason, this month you can't make your note. You may call a friend, relative, whoever, and you ask for help. Help is asking for someone to pay your note or to give you money so that you can pay your note for this month. What
Mhm.
help does is help actually sustains the conditions that exist. So you're no more employed. Your financial system is situation is not any better. Nothing has changed. You have just prolonged. You have just delayed the inevitable, and you have taken help, this money, to keep you in the same condition that you're actually in, which is in fact the problem. So the problem is not addressed. You are just maintaining the problem. That extra money, that note, the payment of that monthly note is just keeping you in the problem. Support is different. Support is someone who says, hey, listen, I know that you're in a tough situation. I know someone who can tell you how to refinance your note and maybe get you into a note that's more manageable while you're struggling with your finances. So I'm going to, give you the number of my brother-in-law who works at the dealership, or who can tell you, go to your dealership and ask them for this, or show them how to do that. Or someone who says, hey, listen, right now may not be a time for you to own a car. Get out of this as unscathed as possible. Let me show you how you can sell it, or let me show you what you can do. That is something, support is something that changes the conditions that you're in. It doesn't sustain them like help. It actually changes the condition you're in. If you sell your car, if you refinance your car note, now those conditions have been changed. So I say that help, if you want to, sort of think about it, I said it's like the ball that oscillates and settles in the same place. It is an action that really produces no result.
Right.
There's movement, but the movement doesn't take you forward. And if I could, that's part of the reason for the ask backwards way to move forward, because I thought to myself, if you ask someone to turn around and then walk forward, they cannot do it. You simply
Nah.
cannot do it. You literally, if you stood up right now and I said, go that way, but turn around, you cannot do it. It is an extremely laborious and difficult thing to do. So that's what help is. Help is a lot of motion and a lot of activity that changes nothing. Support may not be as much activity, but it does actually move you from one condition to another.
I think what distinguishes those two is that support actually requires effort on your part, whereas a lot of people are unwilling to make the effort. They're unwilling to say, okay, This person is offering to support me in this area to help change my condition, but it is going to require something from me. I like how you made the distinction with like the part the it was it's, the way you write it's just so funny because you said it is rare to find a poor person involved in any activity that does not involve the pursuit of something subsidized or the result of some assistance. As someone who desires to be poor and miserable, you must begin seeking help early and often. Your search will be fruitful. Shifts in the modes of production have moved money and resources away from manufacturing and other key economic sectors and concentrated them in the social service sector. So rest assured, you will be unable to exhaust the plethora of social programs available to help you. And then you contrast it with support. And so my biggest takeaway from that, I was like, you know what, you don't want to, or at least to my audience, you don't want to be that person. We understand like right now we're living in very economic uncertain times. Interest rates are kind of like touch and go. Inflation is just out of control, ridiculous. And the tendency to want to be like, you know what, I need some help is there. And I don't want to minimize that. But what I want to encourage people to do, which is what most people in the population don't want to do, they don't want to seek support and change some habits and change some things in an effort to change and get different outcomes. They're just like, I just need you to give me a check right now. I need a bailout. I need a stimulus. It's like, gimme. And notice, think about all the people you know that got some stimulus money during the pandemic. Where are they now, or what are they doing now? Would it have perhaps been better to offer support with some real solutions other than help? I don't know. That's something people need to think about. But it definitely made me think about. When I read this part, I was like, yeah, I know the help person, and it's no matter how much you help them, their situation never changes, and they'll constantly want to come back. And that's one thing. Every mentor I've ever had, where there was in the entrepreneurship space, they did not help me. They supported me, meaning they're like, here's the book that I read that got me on the path to where you say you want to be. You need to read this book. And it's like, well, if you don't read the book, then you won't get the tools and the resources that you need to get to where you want to go. They never helped. It was always in the form of support, because people who are where you want to be, they're not going to help you, but they will offer loads and tons of support when they see that you're willing to take the initiative and put forth the effort to help you support your own self. See, I'm trying to change my own language, right? Girl, you see, you changing lives one book at a time, sis. But I ooh, the iPad is talking. I think that was Siri. I lost my place. Here we go. What I want to do now is I want to shift to pillar number. Okay, this was a hard one, y'all. And so when I talk about this, it's such a touchy subject and people are so triggered. But if we don't talk about this stuff, we're not going to be able to get different outcomes. And we're definitely not going to be able to change the trajectory of our lives and our future generations' lives if we don't talk about it. Pillar number 8, you titled that chapter, Make That Out of Wedlock Birth Count. I was like, see, why she going there? I wasn't ready, but I want to read, if it's okay, Sister Celeste, paragraph 1 on page 30, because it was very, very powerful and I couldn't unsee it. You said, poor people are family oriented. And I was like, oh, okay. They have babies and so should you. Creating the right family structure is central to your moving towards poverty. To be clear, simply having a baby will not automatically make you poor. Wealthy people have babies all the time. Remember, poverty has nothing to do with money. It is the result of bad choices and poor choices. When done in the way I describe, having a baby is a prodigious way to erode wealth. Having a baby has the potential to suck up your money, slow your upward mobility, and create dysfunction in your personal life. But wait, here's the rub. you must commit to an out of wedlock birth, and you should do so early and often. Y'all, she writes like this the whole book. And you're just sitting there like, no, oh no, don't do that. That's not the way. And it's done on purpose. So, talk to us about this segment of the book and how you tie the chapter, That's My Baby, how to make that out of wedlock birth count. How are you tying that to poverty and misery?
Well, statistically, first of all, I want to start by saying that this is not a chapter to bash single moms or people themselves who are born out of wedlock, but it is an opportunity to look at that and to look at it deeply and say, okay, what is the impact? What is the effect that this behavior, that this choice has on my life? So when we say have an out of wedlock birth early and often, statistically, there are really three things. Because in the free market capitalist system that we have, it's actually not as easy as you think to be poor. Our economic system is actually very fluid. So time and effort can really take anyone and make them at the very least middle class.
Right.
A little time and effort can do that. And really all they say that you need to do to eventually end up in the middle class is, I'm sorry, my throat is dry.
Uh,
Um, all that you need to do is to delay having children until you're married, to graduate from high school, and to have a professional job before you have children. So that's sort of it. Anyone who follows that over a period of time, at some point in their life, will end up in the middle class.
Got you. Go ahead and get you some water. I'm
All right.
good. We're good to
Thank
go. Yeah, when she so when she wrote that, I was like, "Oh no, no, no!" Just the names of the chapters alone, but that one hurt a little bit, but it needed to be said, and we really need to start telling people, young people, this very, very early. And I loved this aspect of the book because it literally shows you how to organize your family to create poverty so that if you're smart, you're going to avoid the things listed in the book.
Yes.
What would you say what is it about modern society that you believe causes people to think that we need to reinvent the wheel regarding appropriate family structures? Because like particularly in the Black community, we have this trope, like, well, it takes a village, and you know yeah, we have a lot of single moms, but these kids are fine, everything's fine, I can do better all by myself. Like, we just lying to ourselves. What do you think is what about modern society makes us think that we can reinvent the wheel in terms of proper family structures, reinvent it to where we think we're going to get better outcomes? Because history has shown us that that's not true. But for some reason, the liberal elites keep shoving that narrative down our throat to make us believe that it is true.
Well, I think that a lot of that, I'm very suspicious of people who say it takes a village, to raise a child. I definitely agree that it takes support. But the idea of it taking a village to raise a child is a very Marxist idea. It actually belies the idea that children belong to their parents and instead belong to a community, which is not true.
Mm,
So when you have families that are vulnerable, um, either through single motherhood or in all types of ways, different types of family organization and structures that can leave families vulnerable. And I'm going to define family in a second. So
okay.
this will make some sense. But when you have those situations, those people who are products of those families and those type of structures are far easier to manipulate into other people's concepts of how they would like to reorganize society. So if we understand, which we do, that family is the foundational institution upon which all the rest of society is built. The same way you would build your house. I mean, we all learned this from the Three Little Pigs. It is incumbent to think you want to create, to the very best of your ability, the strongest family you possibly could, because the strongest foundation is likely to produce a house that can withstand the wind and the rain and the snow and the sleet. So you sort of want to have a very good foundation, and on top of that, that's your base to build a very good structure. And so, in my definition in the book of family, I say that family is two things. It is both a unit of advocacy that moves children from adolescence to adulthood. And it is also a unit of protection that shelters the people in the family from changes in the environment, from social and political systems. So you need to have both of those. And what I do say is anybody can be a family. I watched recently when Dylan Mulvaney was on with Drew Barrymore, and he said something, and everyone commented on the kneel. What and I did. I was part of the crowd. I was in the chorus. But what I found most interesting, and it was very, you really had to listen. He said part of the reason when she asked him, how does he cope? What was his self talk? How is he making it through? Dylan Mulvaney said, my chosen family. And that stuck out. I heard that in my ear, that rung in my ear. And I was like, your chosen family. And I write in the book, any group of people, and this is fine. Any group of people can get together and call themselves family. And to each other, and maybe to everyone else, they are a family. However, that does not mean that they will all produce the exact same outcomes. Every family does not produce the same outcome. And so, unfortunately, if we really care about people and we want to say, hey, listen, we can support you when things go wrong, because we can't all we're not all able to manage and manipulate the environment. Some things happen to us, and they happen to all of us. So we can understand that, and we can be compassionate about that. That's not an excuse to not be compassionate, but it is also not an excuse to tell people things that are not true, and to tell them, no matter what you do, simply because you're alive and breathing and you're a good person and we like you, whatever structure you have is going to produce the highest level of results, or going to produce the results that you may want. People who have great situations, come from great families, have problems, have kids that have trouble, have all kinds of difficulties. It's not a guarantee, but you can bet if you're on a weak foundation, your chances are slim to none.
Right, right. I like how you say today you have the freedom to organize your family in any way you wish. As someone seeking poverty, know that poor people enjoy all kinds of family configurations. However, these configurations usually do not consist of both biological parents raising their children together. Then you say, this is because the liberal elite do not value the specific role functions of a traditional mother and father. Instead, they insist that a responsible adult be present, and the replacement of mothers and fathers with responsible adults has been working out great. And the sarcasm, it takes a while to get used to it, because the whole time you're just like, but no, no, don't. It's very emotionally charged when you're reading this book, because you are writing with such an emphatic way, like, yes, you must do it this way. And when you do it this way, you are definitely going to be headed down the road of poverty and misery. And I'm sure that's how you designed for the book to
And you will.
flow.
You will. And if
Right.
right after that, I actually do a list of some of the things, some of the statistics that happen to people in that situation who were raised in those scenarios. And I end up by, oh, I'm sorry if you were going to go on.
No, I was gonna actually go through those, because I was like, you reference Alex Colvin in his article, "The Breakdown of Family and Secular Culture." he highlights some of these advantages of being raised by a responsible adult, meaning number one, divorce is the leading cause of childhood depression. 70% of adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers are from single parent families. 63% of youth suicides are single parent children. 70% of teenage pregnancies are single parent children. And 75% of juveniles in youth correction facilities are from single parent families. So here's what we're not saying, because y'all know I come from a long line of single mamas. Like, I I'm the fourth generation and the first generation that I am aware of that has actually been in a sustained, prolonged, bona fide state of marriage to the same one flesh partner. But when we talk about this, I know firsthand of the deficiencies of coming from that environment. I'm not saying that you just doomed from the womb if that's your story. We know that's not the case, but we can't deny that these statistics are not real. And we all know somebody that just turned out to be the best thing since sliced bread, even though they were raised in a single parent home. But we also know, we know more people that feel these statistics apply to. We just know them. And so we have to be willing to have the conversation and be like, you know what, we're not getting favorable outcomes if we continue to allow the culture to sell us on the idea that varying configurations of family structures, that they're all created equal and that your outcomes are going to be just fine as long as there's love within these family structures. Because you can't tell me that, Pete Buttigieg and his boo thing, or what's the other guy, from him and his partner just adopted some twins, the conservative white guy, what's his name, y'all, help me out. We can't say that, that family structure is not going to the outcomes, we have no idea what those outcomes are going to look like, because it's just, one, it hasn't really been seen in history. So it's like we're living through an experiment. And I am gravely concerned for those outcomes. So um on page 34, no, we talked about the different family configurations, and you also talk about three qualities that people who are seeking to be in poverty and misery should look for when choosing who to have a child with. I just need you to spend a little time on that part, because y'all, she literally gives you like step by step, like, okay, it's one thing to be like, yay, I'm gonna have this baby and I'm single parent and it's all good. She takes it a step further and was like, well, you gotta pick the right person, right? She was like, now that you know what to do, the only other decision is to find the right person to do it with. So she goes, finding the right person with whom to create a baby may be tricky, but don't be fooled by material success. So the three things that you talk about that people should look for when they're looking for a person to just boo up with and just have a kid out of wedlock is a comfort seeker, a person who deals in excess, and a person that exercises personal autonomy. Can you talk about why did you pick those three things as being the top targets for a person that's like, yes, I am seeking to have this baby out of wedlock, and these are the types of characteristics that they should possess?
Well, yes. And the first characteristic is that if someone was willing to have a baby with you out of wedlock, I told you, you could definitely be assured that they want to be poor. That you can't, you have to want to be poor.
Right.
If you make that purposeful decision, if you seek that. So comfort seekers, I say in the book that people who perpetually seek comfort, that is a sign of internal distress. So
Mm.
people who need to be soothed all the time, and this can extend in ways like use of alcohol, drugs. There are all types of way that people self soothe. People who are perpetually seeking to soothe themselves is a signal that there is some internal distress. So people who have that level of internal distress are very unlikely to have the type of time and the ability to dedicate themselves to something as important as raising a child, because that is always going to be somewhat offset by their need to go find whatever this comfort is that they're looking for. So that's one thing. So that's someone who's distracted because they have a need that's bigger than you and the family you're trying to create. They've got to first manage their level of comfort, and then once that's done, they can get back to you all. That's one. The second thing was oh, tell me the second one again.
Deals in excess.
Excess. All
Yeah.
right. So yes, I make the point in juxtaposition. I said that poor people consume resources excessively, while wealthy people consume resources moderately. And the reason that's important is because whatever your resources are, when they're beginning to run out, that's when you start to find instability. Instability is generally not good in families. Families need to be very stable, very even keeled, very predictable places. Swings, lot, emotional swings, financial swings, all of those types of swings, which is why in my definition, I have family as a unit of protection. It is a unit of protection. This is what you're being protected from: unpredictable circumstances, usually externally. In a good family, that unpredictability should be outside of the home. If you have a very vulnerable family, that unpredictability can be sitting on your couch. So, wealthy people have an understanding that they have to manage over time. And so they consume their resources moderately. One, as an exercise of discipline. That's part of that long suffering and long patience that we talk about because it's good for you. It's part of the time and pressure that gets you into a place where you'll shine. That's one reason. And the other reason is because getting into a situation where resources are running low or are no longer available creates panic, anxiety, and things that are antithetical to the type of tranquility and stability that's needed specifically for raising children and supporting the person you're raising them with.
Ah, and then number 3, this one really threw me for a loop. You said exercise personal autonomy. Um, talk about that one.
Yeah, so people who exercise personal autonomy is the rule of self.
Hmm.
People who exercise personal autonomy are people similar to what we talked about before. They can do it their way. They don't have to do it any other way but their way, and they are positive that their way is going to work and that they're going to be the one in a million who found a way to do something and to achieve a particular goal that had nothing to do, that didn't follow a process, that wasn't part of the narrow process that does it. They have divined their own way. Now, I bring up in the book a lot of the reason, and this goes back to the liberal elite and the menu. Part of the reason people believe that and can easily fall into that trap is because we see people who are exalted in the culture, artists, athletes, those type of people who have an exceptional gift or an exceptional skill that allows them, actually, because of that exceptional gift and skill, allows them to take a path that maybe others can't take and be extremely extraordinarily successful. So there's those folks are incentivized to do that because they have something that the rest of us don't have. I say we are trying to take the life of people who are extraordinary and apply it to us who are just ordinary. If you are not the beneficiary of some great skill or some amazing talent, doing it your way is not going to work for you. You can't do what they do. You have to assess yourself and say, hey, look, I'm like everyone else. I'm just ordinary. And so for me to get from point A to point B, I'm going to have to look at those who did it before me and follow that path, which is
I'm all
usually very narrow.
right, I'm always saying I'm just regular. I really, I always say that now, and I can say it with purpose. So, y'all, when I say pillar number 7 in the book, we all know this. We all know this, but I am going to demonstrate that despite the fact that we all know this, we have been conditioned and maybe somewhat brainwashed into thinking that, well, even though we know this and the outcome is not going to be good, let's just keep doing it anyway. Pillar number 7, this was going to be really hard for some people to understand. But in theory, many of us know that going to college is a trap and a scam. But many of us are unwilling to buck that system and to do something different. And correct me if I'm wrong. When I say do something different, I'm not talking about reinvent the wheel. But what I'm saying is the past, maybe 30 years have demonstrated like, okay, no, we're not getting the outcomes that were promised. They told us to go to college, go into all this debt, get this degree. And now when I come out, I got to still go home, live with my mama. I got all these student loans. I'm not hireable because I got this gender studies degree or this sociology degree or this communications degree. And I'm not well. So when times get hard from a poverty perspective, or when children become of age, I think we default to what we know, right? Which is going to school. Like I have female friends of mine that when times got hard and they just felt like they didn't have any direction, the first thing they do was like, I'm going back to school. And I'm like, well, who's paying for that? And they would go into all this debt to get another degree. And then when they're done with the degree, I'm like, so now what? And they're just like, I don't know. So I'm gonna go back and get another. I'm like, so now you're on a PhD. Oh, okay. So, I mean, unless it's in biophysics or like, why are you doing this? So I think many of us either we decide to go and get an advanced degree and we go into more debt to do it, or we herd our children right on to college or university and we let them get a degree that's pretty much useless, and then we're confused when we're drowning in debt and unable to get a job to make ends meet when we graduate. So talk to us about what many of us know to be true, but why did you say that if you can't spot the sucker in the room, it's probably you as it relates to going to college?
Yes. So, interestingly enough, this is one of the chapters and one of the pillars that a lot of people struggle with, and particularly people who went to college and believe that that activity was beneficial to them. And
Right.
in many cases, it was. So there are a lot of people that, not just from the experience, but the trajectory that their life was put on based on their field of study, has sort of made them who they are today and was a net good.
Right.
So we're not saying that that's an impossibility, and we certainly want to say that there are certain professions for which serious high level training is needed. Anybody who is going to be saving my life, I want them to have the highest level of training available. Any life saving activity, and not just if you want to fly my plane, if you're going to do my surgery, if any life saving, obviously, profession certainly has to have high level of training. So I'm not saying there's no place for college, but I
Right.
am saying that it has been abused, and a large portion, a significant portion of people who've gone to college are inappropriately placed. And I think a lot of that has to do with a couple of things. First of all, it's nostalgic.
Mm.
Parents look back 30 years, 40 years onto what it was like for them and don't realize that their children live in a different economy than they lived in.
Right.
So when I talk about shifts in the modes of production, when we were a industrial civilization, and even towards the end of the industrialization, when we started to bring in machines and technology, you had to have a large cohort of people that were highly trained that could manage large swaths and organize and administrate what needs to be administrated to produce, to have a production produced by large swath of working adults. So if
Right.
you've got so many hundreds of millions of working adults that are producing different things, that requires some level of management. And
Right.
there's some skills that have to attend to that management for those endeavors to be successful. Okay, that's 40 years ago. You move on and we decide, hey, listen, we're not going to have a manufacturing economy anymore. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to dedicate the bulk of our economy into selling money, which is
Mm,
what we have right now. What we do in our economy, we don't make a lot. We do make some things, but we don't make a lot. We've exported a lot of what we make to other places. We looked for what they called, those of you who went to B school, emerging markets.
right.
That means somebody else somewhere else. And so we found those emerging markets and we gave a lot of our manufacturing capabilities to those other places. And we decided what we were going to be was the money sellers of the world. Well, money selling, particularly coupled with technology, when you can sort of automate um, banking in such a way and lending in such a way, you don't really need large swaths of people to do that. So when I say money was moved away from the manufacturing sector and then concentrated in the social service sector, we
Mm,
find that interestingly, since we're not necessarily building televisions and cell phones and watches and uh, crafting shoes and making garments, what we do now have as a product is people who are in need, most of them who came from unstable family lives, their early lives may not have been particularly that good, are now very available to be products in this new social service cottage industry.
mm. Okay. So when you say that you have some statistics to support that, particularly the cost of education, you say that it costs $2,647 for a college or university education in 1976. Like, if we could get a college education for that today, it would be amazing. But in 2006, the average cost rose to 38,400, and that college or university education has inflated along with all other products or services. So that basically means, you guys, your college costs, it costs more, but it's worth less than what it was. And then beyond the cost of college, you've got this unique opportunity, as Celeste says, to waste 4 years producing nothing. Like, you in there for 4 years, you're not acquiring any discernible skills. And then you're also stacking massive amounts of debt. So basically, the huge supply of people that possess bachelor's degrees and then the limited demand for those degrees in the job market is basically an unemployment advantage that you can capitalize on. So if you're really committed to being poor, she was like, you absolutely must go to college. I some people, I get judged for it because, I'm a homeschooling mom. And when I tell people that, in our family, college is not a necessity, they don't understand. Well, what do you mean? Well, like, well, what are they gonna do? And I'm like, there's so many other things that they can do. I mean, they've got gifts, talents, and abilities. It's obvious that they're teachable and they're able to acquire knowledge. They're actually able to acquire more knowledge in less time than if they were in a government school. I'm like, there are so many things that they could be doing. I am a Booker T. Washington, do for self, be
At that bucket.
enterprising, be innovative, like make something, produce something, add value to the marketplace kind of girl. So this chapter was my favorite chapter, probably because it wasn't too much judgment barking up my tree, but I appreciated it because I was like, I'm there, and I know I get it. I have friends that, they're like, "Yeah, but I just want them to go." But I'm like, "You gotta think through this, because it is not how it was 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 25, even 15 years ago. It's a completely different playing field. And I think if we don't adequately equip and prepare our children to explore other alternatives, they're not really going to be able to compete in the marketplace. And they're not going to be able to add any value. Because I don't know how much value a sociology or, gender studies degree is in the open market these days, but it's not worth much. And they can't live home forever. We have to start thinking through. We have to equip our children to to do more than consume, but they need to be able to produce um something and add it to the marketplace and have some sort of marketable skill. Um
And
Go
one of the things
ahead.
also in terms of going to college is not only financially, is in most cases, is it going to, create debt for you. The Bible says all debt is slavery. So
Mm,
I'm not one of these people that believes in necessarily good debt. I know that's a idea people float around. Oh no, but that's good debt. Well, maybe not. Let's think about that. There's a couple things I want to say about college education debt specifically, but I also want to say that the quality of the education, even if you go, oftentimes is disastrous, and particularly if you're not in a very rigorous field of study. The quality of the education is terrible, and it's on purpose. And this is what happened with government subsidy. When the government jumped in the 80s, jumped in and decided that every child had to go to college, and the ability to pay should not be a barrier. Under,
right.
they would loan you money. There were going to be low interest loans, and everybody who wanted to go, that was the key,
Yep.
wanted to go, can go. What they never said is everybody who's qualified to go can go. And the reason is they removed that subsidy, having all of that government money pumped into colleges and universities. Those subsidies lowered the quality of education because it removed the incentive from the university to compete for the best students. So
Right.
when you say that the A student can enroll in your university and the government will pay you just as much as enrolling a D student in your university, you have a lot of people who should never have been in school, who are graduated now, God bless you, who walked and graduated now, but are some of the poorest thinkers and some of the most incapable people, because that incentive was removed, and students themselves didn't have to perform better because you knew you could go somewhere. Even if you didn't go to the school of your choice, there was no option. There was no way you couldn't go to college because somebody was going to take you, because there was a price tag. The government put a price tag on your head, and there was always going to be a university or an institution that wanted that money.
You listen, I look back, like now, my alma mater, who at one point used to be like Spelman and Morehouse, used to compete for being number one and number two in terms of HBCUs in this country. And if you look at the admission standards now, I'm just like, well, what's the point? Like, I'm not paying y'all 40, 50 grand a year. And most of the students there, the first 2 years, they're all in remedial classes because they just got to bring them up to where they should have been when they graduated high school. To me, I'm like, that degree ain't worth it. And y'all ain't getting my money. Not one twin. Nope. Not one child of mine, boy or girl. I'm not doing it. Nope. Not gonna happen. I get flack all the time. Yes, you want to go? No, it ain't that serious. Like I'm not paying over 100 grand for nostalgia. I'm just not doing it.
And to
And
learn the step.
right, that too, or to come back hating men. Like if my daughter come home with this misandrous, this is white privilege, I'll bust in the chest. Nope, not gonna happen. So talk to us briefly before we move on to the next pillar. Why do you think people why we know that people know this, but why do you think they still subscribe to this plan, knowing what we know about the inflationary costs of attending, about what they're coming out learning, um, what they're learning there? Why do you think people still subscribe to it?
The
Like, why are
liberal,
they letting their kids go and being English and history majors?
because the liberal elites made a commercial.
Ah,
And the commercial said that if you go to college over a lifetime, you will make $1 million more than people who did not go to college. And they played that commercial for like 25 years. They got 2.5 generations of people who watched daytime television, who saw that commercial every 8 minutes in rotation and believed that. Now, nobody did the math to see if that were in fact true. When it was done, it was determined that it was not. But that was a menu item that was advertised to you like a fillet of fish. It was advertised to you, and that's why people believe it, because they were taught. That's a belief. That's one of the beliefs that is not your own, that was
right.
given to you by the liberal elite.
Like, nobody I distinctly remember when I graduated high school and I enrolled, at Spelman, like, I did that whole college process by myself. I didn't even understand the financial aid process. Like, I had no idea. I didn't know how I was gonna pay for it. I just showed up on campus. When I got that award letter, I didn't look at how much the cost of attendance was versus how much financial aid I got, and then there was gonna be a deficit. I promise you, I don't know where my mind was, but it was not on the map. And I distinctly remember after that first semester, they were like, "Okay, well, you have a balance." And I was like, "Well, what you want me to do with that?" They were like, "Well, ma'am, you have to pay this." I was like, "Well, what money? Y'all can't give me some more money?" And I'm like, "Y'all gotta find me some money from somewhere because we don't have like a conversation was never had." And I know people are like, "How are you that stupid that you didn't know?" Listen, I promise you, I
Mhm.
have no reason to lie to you, to paint some picture like I want a victim, but I think I was just enamored with the idea of I'm going to college, right? I'm going away. It was a different world was like swirling in my mind. I
Mhm.
just knew I was gonna find me my Dwayne Wayne on campus. Like I I was not prepared. I'm serious. I am dead serious. Like I had this fantasy in my mind, and it I woke up real quick when I'm up at night like this dorm food is nasty and it's expensive. They got me in this hot dorm. We ain't even got AC. Why am I paying for this? And then I was just like, so now I'm in panic mode. I'm like, well, I got to get a job. Now I have to get a job and I have to, this course load and this job. And I'm just having to figure my way out through life. And it was just, that was a very, very I just wish someone had told me ahead of time and I could have probably figured out a different path. But it wasn't explained to me. And like you said, it was on the menu. And I picked that bad boy up. Yep, I want that one. And if AOC probably wasn't born, but if she was born, all I could probably hear her say, well, just pay for it. Like, well, how? Just pay for it.
Well,
That,
the failure in this, and to me, it's almost criminal. The most insidious thing, and this is the failure of secondary schools.
mm,
It's not only that you go into debt. What they don't tell you is this is special debt. This
mm-mm.
is extra special debt. This not like any debt anybody else has. This is not your car note. This is, you may have parents that pay a mortgage, so you think, oh, okay, this is like mortgage debt. No, college debt is special. And the reason it's special is because every other debt has some ability to get out of it or some ability to manipulate it.
Right.
You can refinance it, you can renegotiate it, you
File
can
bankruptcy.
discharge some of it. College debt is the only debt that I'm aware of, and I look at debt. Is the only debt. It is non-negotiable, non-free, refinanceable, non-dischargeable. If you ever wanted to have a rope around your neck that will stay with you when you wake up in the morning and that will lay back down with you when you go to sleep, it is that student loan. And to me, to send students out in droves, headed, because you were not the only one. You can believe you were not the only one.
Mm.
Headed into a situation where they are tying themselves. And in what? In service of the bank?
Yes.
In
Oh, yeah,
service
that's
of
some
the
loyal
bank?
blood. It's faithful.
In
Faithful
service
and
of the
true.
bank, you are tying a rope around your neck without, in most cases, in many cases, any guarantee for what could happen in your life in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years when you are expected to pay that back. You don't know what the economy is going to be. You don't know what your individual situation is going to be, but you have tied this thing to your neck and they have provided you no way out. There's no escape room for this.
Right. RC says, I thought Biden said we could erase it all. Yeah, the fact that we were sold that and people actually believed it like it was legal or enforceable or doable, it's a mess. It
Well,
is
that's
a
no
mess.
more constitutional than if a painter comes to my house, paints the house, and I don't pay him. The government can't go pay the painter. Why?
Right.
The government can't pay the painter because I entered into a private contract. The government has no authority in a private contract.
Right. Well, he tried to exert his authority in that remember, they believe the government is God. So, Daddy Joe was going to swoop in. I believe he did that for votes. And I get it. So many of us are with that ball and chain around our ankles with that
Mhm,
student loan debt,
mhm.
that it was real alluring and attractive. We was like, well, I mean, I don't like him like that and I would never vote for him. But if he's going to do it,
I will take it.
I might. You know what I'm saying? I might take it, but it's not happening, y'all. It's not gonna happen. But that this aspect of the conversation was very interesting because my peers, a lot of our children in the next 3 to 4, sometimes 2 years are going to be college age, and we need to have that discussion about what's the plan. What do you want to do? If you want to go to college, then we need to sit down and understand what that's going to look like. Why are you going? What is the course of study? What is the outcome? And so I know so many parents are like, well, they're just going to go and they'll figure it out when they get there and they'll find themselves. I'm like, no, that's really not how it works.
Well,
Um,
I say in the book that the absence of a plan is a plan. The
you do say
absence of
that.
a plan is the way to plan to fail.
It is. It is. Right. You're right about that. So pillar number 5, this was right up my alley. Because one, I'm kind of living an aspect of this now, and pillar 5, y'all, she titled this one "Get Sicky with It." Not get sicky with it. Says get sick with it to generate your healthy body, one cell at a time. You say here that poor people suffer from a deep sense of spiritual deprivation and lack. um Talk to us about what you mean here, and if you can, connect it to the pillar of sickness and health. And I'm gonna spend a little bit of time here, y'all know I used to be a health and wellness coach, so I'm gonna have to spend some time here, because we got some issues in this area, so we need to talk about it. Talk to us about that. When you talk about that spiritual deprivation and tie that into the sickness and health conversation.
Okay, so if you think about wealth,
Mhm.
and people often say that your health is your wealth, and that's very true. So, in the same way, in an economy such as ours, a free market economy, it's very difficult to remain poor. You can be poor. Most people, like I said, it's fluid. So you go up and down at certain points in your life. Usually when you're young and starting out, you have less money. The more
Right.
you work and the more you pursue your endeavors, you invest in yourself, you make more money, you sort of move up the ladder. Most people have the most amount of money and assets in the later years of their life. So that you kind of move through that line. You're not sort of stuck and fixed in one place. The same is true for your health. Now, this is not to say there are not people that that don't have genetic issues.
Right.
And certainly we have to be very compassionate about people who have illnesses and who are sick. I'm
Right.
talking about healthy people.
Mm.
I'm not talking about people who have a sickness or some genetic issue. I'm talking about healthy people that behave in ways that make them sick, which is why I say there are ways that you can behave where you can degenerate your body one cell at a time. And
Right.
you can do this, and it's not easy because your body, for healthy people, is made to be healthy. Your body wants to have homeostasis. It is always going to run to regenerate itself, to renew the cells, to do everything to fight off. That's why we have our T cells. As soon as something is noticed in the body, the T cells go run to it and fight it off like a cartoon and bam and pow and all of that. So you are designed to
Right.
be healthy. You have to actually work. If you are a healthy person, you have to work to be unhealthy. And I show you how to do it. So if you're
She
willing
does.
if you're willing to undertake it, and I mentioned this is not going to be easy and it will take time. So you will need patience to do this. But there are four things that you generally need to be healthy. That is proper food, proper rest,
Mhm.
proper amount of water intake, and proper exercise. Absolutely eliminate all of that. If you're doing that, you're going to have very difficult, if consistently doing that, you're going to have a very difficult time producing a healthy body. But if you will eliminate that, that is not enough. That's enough to get you, to a good baseline. But
Right.
that is not enough to make you unhealthy. So I start talking about diseases of affluence. There
Mm.
are diseases that you can get that are based on the way you behave and other behaviors that you can have that if you incorporate into your life, you can make yourself sick.
Mm.
Drug and alcohol use, strongly advised. Sexually transmitted diseases will do a lot for you. Absolutely do a lot for you.
Right.
Smoke, one of the most interesting things that I researched about smoking is uh, they say that smoking exacerbates any disease you have, even if it has nothing to do with smoking.
I heard that,
So
and I was just like, "Wait, what?"
if
Right.
you hurt your toe and you need your toe to heal, smoking will make it heal. The toe has nothing to do with smoking. But anything that happens to you, if you smoke, you can make it worse, which is why I listed smoking as number one.
Right.
It was the first thing I learned. You got to start smoking right away. Right away if you want to be unhealthy. So
Right.
I start to list things that you can do that will help you to be unhealthy because your body is really, this is for healthy people. I remind you, this is not a condemnation on people who are born with illnesses, people who have genetic issues, or people who have gotten an illness, as they've been alive, as time has gone on. This is no condemnation of that. This is people who are healthy who will squalor it.
Right. Yeah, you talk about your journey toward illness begins with deprivation. Why drink tasteless water and eat low calorie, high nutrients foods when you can have a soda and fried chicken wings, honey? I don't know if my mama's listening. I don't know if she's going to bed, but when I am not trying to call my mama out. But when I read that line, I was like, is she talking to you? Because I had just finished having a conversation with her about soda and fried chicken wings. And I was like, I said, lady, listen, my mama's about to be 80 years old this year. I told her,
Right.
I said, if you don't get this insulin resistance under control, and that doctor tells you that now you got to be put on dialysis, I was like, I hope you got a plan. I said, because I can't fit 4 or 5 dialysis appointments a week into my schedule. I can't do it. I was like, "You gotta figure something out." I said, "Because at this point, you know better and you just doing what you wanna do and with no regard to the rest of us that got to figure out what your healthcare is going to look like." And she ain't gonna mind me saying this because I just said this to her and she knows I love her. But when you when you said, "Here's how the poor work to get sick," you said, number 1, poor people do not drink adequate amounts of water. They don't like the taste. They prefer sugary drinks because sugary drinks dehydrate the body. The body and adequate consumption of water has too many health benefits, and you can't afford to take the chance. I was like, I am, and these are things I know, right? Like, so before I started doing YouTube, y'all, I was a health and wellness coach, and I would spend a lot of time coaching people on, okay, tell me what is it that you're overall trying to achieve. And I found one reason why I stopped coaching was because I just got tired of people refusing to accept the current state of their health. And that I got tired of constantly having to not necessarily explain to them that what you're experiencing right now, this is not something out there that's happening to you,
Mhm.
right? Like, it's hard to work with a person that refuses to either accept responsibility or acknowledge their role in how they got to where they are. For so many people, like, the diabetes just crept up on them one day and just be like, next thing you know, and I'm like, no, no, no. I need you to, you told me this is what you eat in a week. I need you to acknowledge that this is not something out there that happened to you, that this is diet and lifestyle choices, these decisions that you made on your own recognizant that got you here. Those were the hardest people to coach because it was easier for them to point outward versus inward. And they'd rather be like, well, I'm just going to take this medication, knowing that the medication wasn't healing them. And they did not want to take actionable, measurable steps to change the trajectory of their life. And I was like, I can't do this. I didn't even in good faith feel comfortable taking people's money at that point. Cause I was like, you ain't gonna do nothing. What I'm gonna sit here and coach you for when I wanted more than you do. So I hung up
That
my hat.
goes back to that goes back even to our earlier conversation about help and support. One of the ways you can determine um, when to support someone, and I would think someone like you, entrepreneurial, very successful. A lot of people are probably coming up to you and saying, can you help me do this and help me do that, and how did you do this and how did you do that? And I can understand that people have asked me, how to write a book. I'm like, don't. But one of the ways you can figure that out is a better question is, what skills do I have to develop to be able to do that? That's a totally different idea. That's a totally different way to approach something. If someone asks you, what do I need to sacrifice to
Mm,
achieve this goal? Someone who's coming up to you saying that or asking you, tell me 3 skills that I need to be very good at to run my own business. What do those things have to be? Do I have to be a good time manager? Do I have to, what are those skills? Because I want to develop them now so that I can do that. That's someone you invest support in.
I agree. I agree. But it sounds like what you're saying is it's all in. Are they asking the right question versus saying, "Tell me, how did you get to where you are?" Is opposed to saying, "What were the skill sets that you developed to do this?" So that
That's
I
why
can
the people that mentor you didn't help you.
know.
They wanted you to acquire this skill.
Yeah.
That's why they had you to read the book, or that's why they had you to participate in a particular activity, because those were skill building things.
Right.
They helped you by directing you to where you can go get a skill. Only you can get that. They couldn't help you get the skill. They could say it's over there and they have it on Tuesday. That's what
Yep.
they can tell you to do. They can't take you on Tuesday and bring you in there and make you run on that treadmill for 45 minutes or whatever it is. So even though people may not articulate it in exactly that same way, there is a difference between somebody who's trying to find out what are the mechanics to this,
Mm,
and that sets them apart from people who are just saying, tell me how you did it. Even if I told you how I did it, you can't do it.
right.
You're never going to be able to do it, because I had developed a skill. And the way I developed the skill is personal to you. It
Mm,
had to be your personality, your
right.
schedule, your set of circumstances. That part you can't tell. Even if you tell someone, you can learn to drive a car. Everyone who learned to drive a car learned it differently. Now, in the end, we all drive.
Right.
How you learned it is specific to you. So no one can actually tell you that. People get very upset. Well, they didn't help me. They didn't support you. Yes, they
Right.
did, but there's something they can't give you.
Right. Like some people just unwilling to do the basics, like, I don't know, Google, right? Like I'm like, well, what have you started? And when you ask them, they've done no baseline work on their own. So I'm like, so you're coming to me and you're asking me this, but like you haven't even done the basics. I and I don't wanna be, disparaging, but I just be like, "You too far gone." Like, I can't help you right now because you're not where you need to be to where you're in the mindset to even invest in yourself, to learn these skills. You won't even Google to figure out where it's like you won't even do the basics. It's hard to support a person, that just they just don't wanna do that, and
Tell
I'm
them to
just
stop
like,
playing on your phone.
"Huh?"
I said, tell them to stop playing on your phone.
Right. I'm just and oh, they's like, "Well, can you call me?
Hmm.
And, like, can I call you?" Like, wait a minute. I'm like, "No, Listen, the journey toward illness, when you say it begins with deprivation, explain that.
Well, yes, because the body is set up to actually, like I said, want to regenerate itself. It's
Right,
actually set up to live and it's set up to thrive. The
right,
only way you can degenerate the body is you have to deprive it of what it needs to be able to do that. And the best way to start, of course, is those four things that I mentioned: proper nutrition and food, the proper amount of water, proper amount of sleep, and proper amount of exercise. And one thing that we should note about exercise, which I did learn from a friend, what makes exercise particularly interesting is that the benefit of exercise is slightly for the body, but it's mostly for the brain. What
right,
exercise does is it actually regenerates your brain. So when you're looking now, people are talking about dementia, Alzheimer's, thinking, remaining sharp for as long as you possibly can because you want to have a high quality of life. Exercise does a lot for that. So when we think about exercise, we think about, and it's true, being able to move and bend and stretch and perform daily activities is extremely important. But what is little known, I think, is exactly the benefit that all that oxygenation, because when you exercise, that means to oxygenate the body, all that oxygenation offers to your brain.
right. That's good right there.
So to make you smarter,
Right, it does.
it'll make you
It
smarter.
does provide mental clarity. Like, I think for me, and this is just transparent moment, because I come from a long I mean, yeah, I do come from a long line of single mamas, but we're just little people, like, everybody little. I'm talking about, like, 5'5" and below. Like, if you hit 5'5", you tall.
Oh, I'm 5 feet. We
I'm
might be
5
related.
right, I'm 5'2", but I was always very, very petite. I never really had to work out, like, weight was never an issue until I hit, like, 40, and so, for me, like, embracing exercise was hard. I was just, like, lightweight upset because I was like, "I resent the fact that I got to work out, like, this is not fair." Like, I never had to do that before, and it took me a while, well, 1, it took me hitting them double digits for me to realize if you don't start burning some calories, like, you gonna swole up, and then it's gonna be even harder. So, when I started walking, I ain't gonna lie, it was so hard, like, my thighs were itching, and I was like, "I have a disease, something's wrong." I was like, "See, I can't do this," and I'm Googling, like, why am I itching so bad? And I was so embarrassed when I found out that the reason why I was itching so bad is because of increased blood flow. I was like, "Dang, it's been that stagnant for that long." Like, my body was confused, like, "What is happening?" And all of the histamine had risen to the surface of my skin because the blood was flowing, which was a good thing, but it was driving me crazy because 'cause I'm in my subdivision looking like I have, like, some sort of leprous disease. I mean, I would have if I could have ripped my clothes off, I would. I was itching so bad. But the good news was when I googled it, it was like it only lasts temporary and it'll pass. After day 3, I stopped itching. When I tell you, you couldn't stop me from walking because I was like, you don't understand. That itching was horrible. And I was
Mhm.
just like, why is this happening to me? But I had to push past that. And that was that uncomfortable, you like being comfortable. And I was like, yeah, that's poverty and misery. And I can't embrace that. So you helped me. You helped me with that. Um, when you said sickness picks your pockets, I said, you know what? I'm about to throw this book because you weren't lying. You were not lying. I just think so many of us don't want to hear a lot of these behavioral and lifestyle things that we're doing that are slowly eroding our potential to be wealthy, not necessarily in a monetary sense, but just a fullness of life kind of sense. And when you said that it picks the pockets, you're right. Between the copays, the deductibles, the medications, and just how it just impacts your quality of life, that was very, very real. Talk to us just a little bit about what you meant by that.
So let me go ahead and confess. So this is when I said I didn't exempt myself from the book. In this chapter, I am absolutely speaking to me.
Okay.
I am my muse here. But I shout out to my mom, who I believe is watching. But she had a saying. There was a time, very very long time ago, and I was gonna buy a membership to a gym, and it was quite expensive, at least for me at that time. And I remember asking my mom, I was like, I want to go, but it's kind of a stretch. And
Yeah.
my mother said simply, you can pay now or you can pay later. But either way,
Hey,
you're going to pay.
mom's wise.
Yeah, so I got that sickness picture pockets from her. It's like you can pay now or you can pay later.
Listen, Celeste, you wrote a book that to me is like a friend who is telling it like it is, but you stopped calling her for a while because she said something or a few things that you just didn't like. But deep down inside, you like, you know what? She's right. But you're just too prideful to admit it. So you just don't call. You kind of stay away. You start withdrawing yourself from her. You guys, that's what this book is. So I want to encourage you guys to get the book because one, it really is funny. I know it doesn't take much to make me laugh, but the way she writes, the cadence, it flows very well and it is going to make you laugh, but it is going to make you walk away examining your own life, examining your own family lineage to say this is how we arrived or failed to arrive where we want to be, and this is why we were where this is why we are where we are. But so let's tell people what is one thing or two that you want people to walk away with after they've read your book.
Well, I think the best thing that people can do is isolate things in their life or goals that they would like to achieve or a lifestyle they would like to have or a
Mhm.
way that they want to live or relationships that they want to be in. All of those things are covered in the book. Find out what those things are and then do one or two things. Make a choice because
Mhm.
again, the absence of a plan is a plan. Not making a choice is the same as choosing. So if you're going to choose anyway, be deliberate in your choice and say, no, I'm choosing this. And if I choose this, and when you do, usually it will unfold just like you walking. And the first maybe couple steps, a couple days will be a little bit difficult, but it gets easier as it goes on because one thing that you find out about yourself is that you can withstand the time and you can withstand the pressure. And that is an extremely good thing to know about yourself. To know if something happens and there's a little pressure on me, I can take it. I can take it and I will make it through. If you actually have that kind of a mindset and that kind of a spirit, you will thrive in life. Because life is incentive will give you incentives. People like that will find incentives in life. I talk about luck. That's what it means to be lucky. What it means to be lucky is to run into a new incentive.
Right. I like that. So I know we're nearing the end of our time, and I really wanted to discuss pillar 4. And so I'm going to run through it really quickly because I felt that it was very important. In recent years, we've heard a lot of talk about, the eroding middle class, and the middle class is dead and there is no middle class anymore. And you have this one section called Invasion of the Class Snatchers. And you say liberal elites have positioned the poor to use advanced degrees, luxury cars, and home ownership to infiltrate the middle class. Today, we have witnessed the successful invasion of the poor into the middle class. Their assimilation continues to eviscerate traditional middle class values by equalizing alternative family organization and normalizing the mores of the poor. So, just who are these poor people hiding in the middle class? Then you say they are reasonably educated and they have professional degrees and they're usually never married or divorced. They frequently expressed their disappointment in romantic relationships while at the same time they celebrate their sexual prowess. They are often the parents of children by multiple partners. And in fact, it is common for children in the same family to have different last names. You go on and you talk about so many things that we've normalized in society, such as, beyond the hours of the school day, poor parents trust Hollywood and social media to raise their kids. They've got strained relationships with their family. They don't develop skills. They treat the poor, treat living, or they treat the world like it's their living room. They don't read. You went in on this pillar. Talk to me, or summarize, if you could, this infiltration in the middle class by people with this poverty and misery mindset. Because when I believe this kind of connects to a conversation about gentrification a little bit, or the opposite of that. Like, if you have a neighborhood and it's relatively middle class or working class families, and it's nice and quiet, and then all of a sudden you've got this invasion come in of these people, like, they make good money, they drive these really nice cars, but something is wrong with these people's mindset. Their kids are out of control, like the neighborhood is going to the pits. Is that what you meant when you were talking about the invasion of the class snatchers?
Well, not exactly. So I'll back up a little bit, but that was a fun
That's
chapter
what
to
I thought about.
yeah.
That's why we moved. I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah. So backing up a little bit before you get to the invasion of the class snatchers, there's a lot of what I say misnomers about social class. So
Right,
first of all, we have to just acknowledge that whenever people are in groups, there's always a hierarchy. That's just human nature. And
right,
so in our society, in modern society, the hierarchy here is class. And we think about classes harkens back to that same nostalgia. We think of class the way we thought of it, and what the middle class was what it was when we were growing up. We have not accounted for
hmm,
uh, shifts in the modes of production that have changed. So there was a time when you could work in a factory, work in a plant, you could do a blue collar job, you could do an entry level job, and that job would allow you to buy a home, get married, successfully get married, in the sense that you could be reliably counted on to provide for your family and raise your children. You
right,
could do that with those types of jobs. Once those jobs started to become outsourced and were no longer available, we had a situation again where we were involved in selling money. That was the lifeblood of the economy. So now those folks went to college, they found other skills, and they're thinking that that income and that dress up. So I've talked about in the book that you cannot tell whether a person is poor or not by their outer and exterior, their accoutrement.
right,
Having degrees, driving nice cars, wearing stylish and designer or very fashionable clothing is not a way to tell whether or not someone is poor. The way to tell, and I said this in the beginning, and hopefully I'm saying it again in the end, is the evidence of your thinking.
Mm.
Your thinking produces a result that I can see. If I can look at your life, I know what you think because you can't produce anything in your life that you didn't think of.
Right.
So I can tell. I used to say all the time, the life is the check. People say, oh, I want to be married. Really? The life is the check. Oh, I want to go to school. You do? The life is the check. If you are not, if it doesn't appear and it's not showing up in your life, most time, not always, most time, that is there's a product of your thinking. So what we're looking at when we see each other, when we are observing each other, what I'm looking at is your evidence. That's what you put forward to me is a display of evidence. And I can look at this evidence, and this evidence is going to tell me directly what you think. And what is and is not on your personal menu tells me if you're having that spiritual lack. So, what I was saying is when we decided that, again, the liberal elite came in and said, listen, we're not going to be able to produce an economy and create conditions where people can be proud of what they produce. Because we know in our society, the producers tend to be at the highest end of the hierarchy and the consumers are at the lowest.
Right.
So what we're going to do is flip the script. And we're going to make people proud of what they consume. So we're going to sell cars, we'll sell degrees, we will sell homes in certain neighborhoods, we will sell fashion, and
Purses, shoes.
all of that. We will
Yeah.
sell lifestyle. And instead of making people proud of their accomplishments and what they produce, we're going to have them and direct them, distract them into feeling proud of what they consume. And not only will they feel proud of what they consume, since we produce it, we'll get rich doing it.
Wow.
Well, those consumers, when I'm thinking of the invasion of the class snatchers,
Mhm.
what we have found is the middle class now, the middle class post industrialization and postmodern cultural society. What we have found now is that those people who are consumers
Mm.
are the people who are now quote invading the middle class. They are no longer producers. Who is now technically the middle class are people who do not earn income from labor. Their income is from investment or dividends. If you solely earn your income from labor, you go to work, no matter how high of a wage earner you are, it is very unlikely that you're middle class because the monetary structure has changed. And I don't think people know that. People think because I'm able to consume at a high level and live in a neighborhood when I was a child would have been a middle class neighborhood. That today makes me middle class. No, you are an invader. You are a class snatcher because you are a consumer who does not know that your consumption does not make you middle class, no matter how proud of it you may be.
Listen, that shut it down right there. So one last question. We talked about this briefly on the phone, and if you feel comfortable talking about it, it's fine. I remember asking you, or I remember you telling me that when you were working on the book and you did a focus group, and you said that for whatever reason, that black men at the time absolutely hated your book. Can you talk to us or share with the audience, one, how long ago was that, and why do you think they hated it?
Well, I didn't say that they hated the book. They disliked me.
Oh,
Yes,
that's
they disliked
worse.
me. They disliked me as evidenced by the fact that they did not want to speak to me when the focus group was over. So
Oh no.
yeah, yes. They said, in fact, I had a moderator for this group. I had done several focus group. It wasn't the first one. And I had a moderator for this one, and this was the only one I had that was specifically for men. It wasn't, all the
Right.
others had been kind of co-ed and had all different types of configurations, but this one was just for men. I thought to myself, well, I'd be interested to see, and it wasn't the whole book. It was just some selected material, a couple of chapters. they got in advance, were able to discuss, and then, I had a moderator, but I was able to listen to the discussion. When it was over, I came back into the room. They had a good 2 hour, conversation or so. And when I came back and I said, well, I'd like to ask some questions, they all said, no, 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 we don't want to hear from you. We're not answering questions. We're not doing any of that. So in fact, it didn't happen. There was no question and answer. I got feedback because I was taking notes while
Mhm.
they were talking, but anything additional at that time I did not get.
Right.
And
Did they give you any feedback? What was the initial feedback, regarding the book from that
Well,
focus?
what I think happened is there were people who the men in my group were black men.
Mm,
And what their thought, at least most of them, the thought was that there were concepts in the book that could be used negatively towards the Black community. Now, as you know, in the book, I say right up front in my introduction that, in fact, I never discussed race. I
you
did
did.
not write the book for Black people, and I did not write it about Black people. I wrote it about poor people. And
Right.
I say in my book, I actually quote the great Dr. Martin Luther King. And I say, Dr. Martin Luther King says anybody can be great because everyone can serve. But conversely, I say in my book, anyone can be poor because everybody can make a bad choice and have poor behavior. I
Mhm.
actually thought that Black people as a whole were too small a group for an idea that was that big. So I never even considered thinking about it in racial terms in that way. I simply thought about it in terms of what universally do people have to do to be poor, and I wrote them a blueprint. This
Right.
is your manifesto.
Exactly. So there was this sentiment that so they internalized it as if it was being directed toward them, but that sounds like projection to me. 'Cause it's like when you read the book, it to me it was colorless. It just it didn't implicate any particular people group. It's literally talking about a set of behaviors and choices that regardless of who you are or what amount of melanin that you have, you can get the poverty and misery outcomes. Just do these things. So I found it difficult to walk away with that conclusion, but I could see like I people do it all the time on my show. I can say one comment and they will internalize that like I was talking to them and I'm like, I don't even know you. Like how can I account for your personal experience? Like how would I have known that? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in the macro, but they tend to internalize it and make it about them when I'm like I would have had no knowledge of that, and I think that
In
yeah,
my family, we have a saying, and that is that truth only bothers those who are living in opposition to it.
that's good. I may have to borrow that one. I mean, yeah, that's a good one.
So I think, there were some issues that maybe that identified some things that people may be personally challenged with, which was not, again, I didn't moderate it. That was
Right.
not, I wasn't directly responsible for that. I was obviously responsible for the material and the content. So I'm not absolving myself, but I'm simply saying that was never the intention. And to be, everyone was cordial when it was over. We all laughed and joked. We hung out for a little while. I had food. People ate, hung around. So it was not a totally negative environment. But in terms of allowing me to go in and then discuss with them that book and ask the questions, I absolutely not.
Wow. Well, I am hoping that my audience, we over here, we encourage people to have the emotional intelligence to challenge themselves, to step outside of their comfort zone, and to engage with arguments that they may disagree with, but that in the end, they're going to find useful and valuable and beneficial for them. I can speak for myself that for me, I'm going to constantly reference this book and there's so many key points of it that are reminders like, "Mm-mm, don't do that. That's indicative of people who have poverty and misery on the brain, and you're not doing that, right? So I love the book. I'm hoping that my audience will go ahead and run to Amazon right now. I've put a QR code up there. You can scan that QR code. I also have the ability for you to click the link there. The name of the book, I did clutch my pearls at first, The Assbackwards Way to Move Forward, just because I'm like, this is a Christian YouTube channel. Y'all know how church folks are. They can't think in the proper categories sometime. And I honestly, I was like, okay, are people gonna accuse me of, promoting profane language? But I was like, you know what? We're mature. When you read the book, it is that title was befitting. And I actually am glad you chose that title because like you said, there's no way for you to move forward if you actually tried, like you said, to kind of turn around and then go forward. It's impossible to do. And the wisdom and the tools that you I'll say the when I say the tools that you provide in the book are tools for you to do the opposite of what she is saying. And I think you should gift this book. We're approaching graduation season. So if you have even a middle schooler entering into high school or a high schooler or someone entering into college, listen, if you grown, you like, I'm 55 and I'm just questioning my whole life right now, this book is for you too, because it answers and explains so much about maybe some choices that you've already made. At least it did it for me. I was like, okay, this is why. This is why we getting outcomes, because this is what we failed to do. But it doesn't leave you hopeless. I believe anyone can change once you recognize that you were on the wrong path and you're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go this way now. It's possible, for you. Now, some of us we do have to deal with the consequences of our decisions. Those don't disappear and go away, but you can learn from your mistakes and be better. So, Celeste, I want to thank you for joining me this evening. I will leave maybe like 5 minutes for some questions. If you guys have any questions, was there something unclear about the definitions of the book? I don't believe that we were disparaging at all. When we talk about poverty, we're talking about a mindset, not necessarily a state of being, because you might be broke right now. Like being broke and being impoverished,
Two
they're
different
different.
things. Mhm.
Right, they're completely different. Yeah, so if you guys have questions, put a Q, drop it in the chat. But I think we did a very thorough overview of the book without giving it away too much. I hope I did it justice for you. Y'all know what to do. Go on and get the book. It is on Amazon right now. It is a quick read. You won't want to put it down. Like, this book was traveling with me all through the house. Like, I'm cooking. I think I messed up the fish the other day because Robert was like, "See, now you messing up my food." So he's gonna get into the book as well. Like, I encouraged him to read it, and I was so pleased when he said that he would. So you have the Chapman household support. As of now, I don't see any questions. So thank you so much for joining us, Sister Celeste. Do you have any final thoughts? How can people find you or learn more about you or get to know more of you?
Well, thank you. First of all, let me say, April, from our very first conversation until right now, we just met, but I absolutely consider you a friend. I am hopeful and really feel sure this is not the last time we will speak. And you really took the book, you read the book, you understood the book, and the evidence of that and your mastery of what I tried to do really made my book look good. And I'm grateful to you for even having me, and for the diligence and the work you put into it to highlight it in this way is specifically special to you. And I'm really grateful to you for that. In terms of finding me, obviously the book is on Amazon. As April said, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter at Celeste_Duffie. And also, I am a regular contributor. I write for Schoon TV, and I write about contemporary things that are happening in the culture. So the book is sort of, the sort of overarching blueprint, but I take some of those principles and some new principles and look at what's happening that we're watching on our TV and that we see on the internet today, and I'm writing about it. So you can find my writings at Schoon TV and on social media at Celeste_Duffie on Twitter.
Absolutely. I have one of my moderators wanted to know, did you read Thomas Sowell as a kid? Because you sound solid.
No, no. In fact, maybe 15 years ago, I had a cousin, my cousin Sam. I had said something, and he said, "You know what you need to do? You need to read Tom Sowell." And I was like, "Who's that?" And he's like, this guy. You got to read him." So I went and I started finding some Tom Sowell, and he's the great. We can,
Yeah.
all to Tom Sowell. He certainly is deserving of all of and Walter Williams. I became subsequently a huge of the late Walter Williams. Love Walter Williams. So between the two of them, yes, they helped inform my this, and but really it's like everything else. These are just pennies that form into a dollar. It's really just being I'm thoughtful about what I think.
Mm.
I'm thoughtful. I'm very interested in what I think and why I thought it, and is that my own idea, and where did it come from? And so, in that sense, over time, those things just got put together once God gave me that gift, and this is what it turned into. But
Well,
I'm so grateful to be here in your audience. I really appreciate you staying the time and participating in the chat. You all are lovely people.
you are welcome.
Great
We're
music
so
coming out of Georgia.
Oh, listen, we worked hard in this part of the country. I'm thankful for you for having me. I'm actually I'm going to do another segment after I drop you out and just engage with my audience a little bit because I haven't talked to them all evening. So, thank you so much, Celeste, for joining us, and I really really appreciate it. Go ahead, get the book, you guys, The Ass Backwards Way to Move Forward. It's a tongue-in-cheek guide to poverty and misery, and that it definitely is. Have a wonderful evening, Celeste. You guys stick around. Um, I am going to uh I have a few announcements I kind of want to go over with you guys. I kind of want to recap this week cuz so much has been going on. It's been amazing. Give me one quick second. All right, there we go. So, you guys, couple of housekeeping announcements. If you have not already registered for the G3 conference, you still have time. And I'm still trying to save you coins. You can save 30% by going to g3men.org. You guys, if you are not familiar with the G3 conference, maybe this will be your first time. Maybe you're like, I don't even know what that is. G3 stands for Gospel, Grace, and Glory. And it is a Christian conference that happens annually. So every other year there's a national conference, and then on the off years it's a regional conference. And it is a commencement, if you will, of some of the most solid biblically sound Bible teachers that come and convene on the city of Atlanta. And every year there's a different theme. This year, the theme is the sovereignty of God. And we are going to be knee deep in the scriptures, knee deep into the fellowship, knee deep into learning about this sovereign God that has revealed himself in the pages of scripture. So it's from Thursday through Saturday. I will be there. I will be exhibiting in the exhibit hall at my booth. I'll be doing some interviews, and I'm hoping to meet so many of you guys there. So if you have not registered already, you can still do so. There is still time. Use my code G3STP.com for 30% off. And you can register and learn all about the conference by going to G3Men.org. That's G3Men.org. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was Did anybody take my advice and subscribe? Or if you already have a subscription to Fox Nation, did y'all watch the Jussie Smollett documentary? Leave me a one if you watched it. I watched so there are, I want to say, 5 episodes to this documentary, right? And the reason why I was so interested in watching it, because when it was happening in real time, I did not believe it, right? But I was intrigued in following the case because I just wanted to see, like, how is this all going to turn out? And y'all, once the buzz of that whole situation died down, I did not know. Y'all, did y'all know that he only served 5 days of time in prison? There is so much corruption in our legal system and in our government, and I don't want to hear nobody say that the corruption and just the nefarious intent is only slanted one way. Because here we saw some key players that are highly melanated, such as the state attorney Kim Fox, such as Juicy Smollett himself, Mr. Hollywood liberal elite, the Obamas. We saw so many key players that were intimately involved in this case that leads me, one, it left me so upset that someone could manufacture a hate hoax like he did and literally get away with it. Um, the former police chief, like, if you watch the documentary, they detail how from the jump they knew that Negro was lying. Like, everybody knew. There were journalists who never bought the story, who did not believe him. But do you know that because he is a member of the protected class, because he is Black, and because he identifies with the LGBT community, that there were so many people that were afraid to just tell the truth out of fear of being called a bigot or being canceled? What the heck has this world turned into where just telling the truth makes you fearful? Right? Not like telling the truth of some like crazy, weird conspiracy where the FBI is going to be on your back. But I'm just saying, like, just stating a bona fide fact because it happens to be against someone who's in the protected class. No one wanted to break the story and just say what really happened. For example, I know you don't watch nonsense propaganda. It really, okay, so let me be clear. It really was a very fair and balanced documentary because there was someone who I would consider a social justician who would be on the side of Juicy Smollett. Yes, she was spewing her racist propaganda and her Marxist ideology. That's definitely in it. But on the other side, I thought it was fair because it actually showed both sides. You got to hear from the attorneys of the Nigerian brothers. Like, the attorney of the Nigerian brothers happened to be a conservative, a Latina at that. And you got to hear from the Nigerian brothers who they left this, right? But they told the truth and shared their ass. Like, this story has so many different twists and turns. I was just like, this world has gone just bat crazy. So I don't know if you saw it. Right. So Sister Mary was saying there were people that were afraid of being cast out of the protected class temple. Um, I'm the same way. I'm shocked Tucker hasn't been taken off the air yet because he's breaking all kinds of, I mean, between the footage from January 6th, like, there's just so much. My admonition to my audience, because we are believers, is 2 things. We don't need to get caught up in all of this foolishness. I think we need to be aware, like, we need to know what's going on. Like, I don't think you need to keep your ear tuned to the street so much so that your attention is not tuned into the word of God. But you need to know what's going on. You need to discern the times, be aware. But if what you see going on in the world today doesn't make you cling to Christ, I don't know what will. I because there is no hope. There's no hope apart from a saving relationship with the Lord of glory, because it is things are declining and the world is just rapidly changing at such a fast pace that if you don't have a solid foundation, if you don't have an eternal hope, you can literally walk through life like just turning on the news will depress you. And then two, you like, I don't even know what to believe. Like if you ever just turned on, like for example, if I was a liberal, I'm not, right? But if I was and I just turned on, let's say Fox News, right? Based on the level of indoctrination that goes through the airwaves, I would be so confused after listening to Fox News and then listening to CNN. I would be so confused after watching, let's say, I'm trying to think. Oh, okay. I would be so confused after listening to like maybe the Daily Wire and then watching The View. Like when you have to examine the opposing viewpoint, if you're not rooted in scripture and if you're not rooted in what is true and what is right, it will almost be impossible for you to discern truth from error. Um because each side is vigorously defending their position, but and each side is, I would say, they're vigorously defending their position and they wholeheartedly believe what they're saying. But the world is just twisted. The world's just twisted, messed up, upside down, and it's like I do this show and I have this podcast to be a voice to a dying world, but it's real hard to not get discouraged and real despondent because every day it's some new foolish stir-fry foolishness of the day. It's just really hard. So that's pretty much all I wanted. Right. You do have to listen carefully because they want you to be in despair, right? God is sovereign even now. That's the only thing I can cling to. The fact that I know I have an heavenly hope and that there are no maverick molecules and God is ruling and reigning and he's in control of all of this. If I didn't have that, I'd be back crazy because child, the way this country is set up, the way, foreign affairs or this country is being destroyed from the inside out. Like I just really believe that. So anyway, what did you guys think of my guest? I hope I did a good job of doing her book justice. You guys, it really is a good book. My family has done nothing but listen to me rant and rave on and on about this book because I've just never read someone write this way to where you're forced to think, wait a minute. Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Or am I supposed to be doing the opposite? Because we've been fed so many lies, like when Celeste was saying that the menu of foolishness that they've been serving us for so long. I believe a lot of us don't even we've been so dumbed down and so indoctrinated that we don't even realize that it's been happening. And I hope that this book allows so many of you to just have that aha moment and that personal internal awakening. That's really what I want. So other than that, I don't have anything else for you. Next week, I will be having Brian Shannon back on the show. We are going to what am I and Brian talking about? I need to go back and revisit because we're getting into it. And we're going to discuss some more inconvenient truths. I hope you guys enjoyed my guest, Brian Shannon. He is the author of the book Missing Pillars, where he talked about father absence. And we're going to be discussing some top articles. One, we're going to be discussing Ron DeSantis's rejection of the Black History curriculum and the implications, the one that promotes queer ideology. Like, we're just going to dispel some lies and kind of deal with the truth. We're also going to be talking about the strategic feminization of Black men. That is a conversation that needs to be had. We're also going to be discussing the leftist pandering and promotion of liberal irresponsibility, irresponsible sexuality through gerrymandering. That's going to be interesting. So I don't know if you guys remember during the election cycle when the Democratic Party was promoting that no voting, no vucking video. Yeah, that we're going to talk about the pandering and them promoting irresponsible sexuality. And then we might talk a little bit about Will and Jada's trash parenting philosophies, along with Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade. So basically, next week is going to be all about the culture. We're going to examine the culture through a biblical lens. He is going to be on. We might throw in there a little Kiki Palmer celebrating single motherhood. Like, we just a mess, you guys. That's why our only hope is in Christ. And we have got to give the gospel, because the more I read those headlines, it just the worse that it gets. And so that's gonna be on I think I had that show scheduled for the 24th. I am not I'm not sure. So anyway, love you guys. You guys have an amazing week. Please keep my family in prayer. It's just, I am suffering well. I'm going to say that. I am suffering well through a major life shift as it regards to loving on my mom and caring for her in this season of life. And I need all the love, support, and prayers I can get, because it is not easy. Maybe one day I'll do a show on elder care. If you'd like to support the show, there's so many different ways that you can do so. I want to remind you guys that you can donate to the work that I do here. It helps keep a high quality show. I am currently trying to replace my PC because the processor is slow and it takes forever to edit videos. And so I want to thank Sister Shamika Moultrie, who has poured and sewed into the work I am doing here. She has kicked off that fund with a generous donation. So if you guys are interested in helping me get a new PC, that would be most appreciated. Also, if you don't want to do that, but you're like, I need to get something for what I'm doing, you're free to visit the Standard Home and Living lifestyle store. I have a few products of the day I want to show you. For example, y'all, these just came in. Thou shalt not try me. Mood 24/7. These just came in. I also have for the babies. Y'all know I wasn't going to leave the babies out. I also just got these in. This resource is called 77 Memory Verses Every Kid Should Know. I don't know how many of you are catechizing your children. I encourage you to catechize your kids because they need to be equipped with the Word of God. But this is just a cute little resource that they can color, and every page has a new memory verse for them to learn. They are to read it, then write it, then color it. And then in the back, my girls helped me pick this out, by the way. They're helping curate stuff for your littles and your grandbabies too. It has where you can check off all the scriptures that you've memorized. So this is super cute. I think I can't remember how much it is, but it's on the website at standardhomeandliving.com. I think under if you go to collections and then go to like journals and books and resources, it's there. And then for the couples, I thought this was cute. Thank you, Sister Mary. I appreciate your support. Absolutely. This one is called 88 Great Conversation Starters for Husbands and Wives. So if you're trying to cultivate a little intimacy and get to know your spouse and get nostalgic and, just kind of have some, I'm sure you couples talk, right? But sometimes we don't talk, right? And so this resource is great for couples where you can like, okay, well, what are we going to talk about? Like, we've been together since Jesus was an infant. I don't know. What do you want us to say, April? I got you. That's what this is for. You've got 88 great conversation starters to enhance your relationship with your spouse with these conversation starters. It's a great resource to create intimacy and build a strong marriage. You can get the conversation flowing, learn more about your partner's hopes and worries and dreams and joys with this fun resource. So I want to be a blessing to you guys. And in exchange for your purchase, you are supporting the podcast, giving you some value. Someone asked, Mary wanted to know, have you vetted that conversation starters? Okay, you want the truth? I didn't, but it's faith-based. Because they just came in and I didn't want to crack it open. Okay, why don't we do that? Why don't we just on the air like this is QVC? Let's do it. Let's open it. And they're not. Now you know I wouldn't expose y'all to stuff that's explicit now, even though the bed is undefiled. You know, y'all figure that out on your own. So the first one is share some memories of our wedding day. What emotions were you feeling and what part of the ceremony stands out in your mind? And then it references a scripture, Song of Solomon 4:9. You have stolen my heart, my sister, my bride. You have stolen my heart with one glance of your eyes. Now I can see this getting something steamy, hot, and heavy started, depending on, how long it's been. But this is cute. Like, look at this, y'all. I thought. Yeah. They all have scriptures on it. So, I mean, no, the Bible get a little hot and steamy. If you ever read Song of Solomon, like, it makes you clutch your pearls. But it's 88 of them. So you can't run out of things to talk about. Maybe y'all can do like one every night, laid up, boot up in the bed, just to start the conversation. So now, yes, I vetted it. That works. Oh, the other thing, tonight I am wearing I've been rocking my Tetelestai, it is finished bracelet, the cross with the Greek inscription. But y'all, I have the necklace now. I don't know if y'all can see that. It is a cross with the same inscription, Tetelestai, on it. Gosh, why I can't never get in the frame? Oh, because it's the opposite. Okay. Can y'all see? Let me take Miss Sister Mary's comment down. Sister Mary, didn't you order this already? Don't you have this necklace? I can't remember. It's cute though. I got a few more of these left. I have plenty of the bracelets left. I also have Soli Deo Gloria bracelets too. I've got Amazing Grace necklaces, Saved by Grace, Grace Alone, something like that. I can't remember. But yeah. So yes, you have the bracelet. I love it because it's adjustable. I don't know if y'all knew that. This bracelet, like if you got real thick wrists, you can expand it or you can tighten it. So like if my daughters are really, really petite and small, I can tighten this to fit them. And they absolutely right. Yeah, I love it. It is super cute. But don't get in the chlorine pool. This is 18 karat gold plated. It ain't 18 karat gold. It's plated. So you do need to exercise caution when in the swimming pool. Like, don't wear this at the pool because I can't warrant that it's gonna look decent when you come out. So I love you guys. Let me go. I will talk to you guys soon. Join me next week on, I think it's the 24th, but check my community tab. I will always post, like if I'm doing a show and I'm going to have a guest, I will post in the community tab. So look for that always. Be sure to like and share this video, comment and subscribe. Listen, y'all need to get us in the algorithm, right? The way you do that is you engage with the video, whether you like it, hate it. Like if you want to cuss me out, that's fine. Like it's still engagement. Now, I'm probably going to block you, but I'm not going to stop you from doing what you want to do. You're free to do that. But I do ask that you at least be respectful. So bye, you guys. Grace and peace. We are out.
God is sovereign over everything. He is sovereign over the entire universe. He is sovereign over nature. He literally has created everything that exists out of nothing.
It is the doctrine of sovereign election that empowers and ignites missions, and it is the doctrine of sovereign election that guarantees the success of missions around the world.
We will not build the church according to the changing whims of an ungodly culture. We will change that ungodly culture by the power of the immutable gospel.
All I have is God wrapped himself in flesh, died on a cross, nailed my sin thereto, was placed in the grave, rose again on the third day, ascended to the right hand of the Father, and is there making intercession for me until such time as my salvation is completed and he takes me home.
The more they see, the more they will love him. Stop giving them all this silly fodder and life principles and lay before them. Live your life in solitude, crying out to God. Live your life on your knees. Live your life with your Bibles torn asunder. Live your life for the people of God to be able to present to them the beauty of what he is, the glory of his cross.
There is no such thing as Mother Nature. God rules and reigns over everything. There's not a leaf that falls from a tree that God did not call it to fall at that very moment. God is in control of every single thing, meticulously ruling over the entire universe. Join us for the 2023 G3 National Conference on the Sovereignty of God.